Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and thank you for joining us today as we continue to interview the contributors to Cold Canadian Crime. Joining me today is Alice Fitzpatrick, the author of The Client. She was born in English border, the English side of the Northern Welsh border and raised in Southern Ontario. Alice writes short stories and novels. Her previous short stories were also published in The Whole Shebang 3, an anthology by Sisters in Crimes Canada. And she's written a total of 4 novels, 3 of the Meredith Island Mysteries, a traditional mystery series set on the Welsh island, features historical novelist Kate Walway. Her second novel in this series was a finalist for the Killer Nashville Claymore Award, and her most recent standalone novel, That Which Is Lost, was also a finalist for this award. Alice, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you, Eric?
I'm good too. So you're in Southern Ontario, correct?
Yes.
Uh, is it a cold winter day today?
It is a cold winter day. I think there's supposed to be flurries or something tomorrow, so it's something to look forward to.
As a BC resident, it's what I always like to hear from people in Ontario. I was sort of doing my homework on your website, alicefitzpatrick.com. And in your bio, you said that when you're at a younger age, you had a dream of being the youngest person to win the Governor General's Award, a literary award for poetry. Just out of curiosity, do you still write poetry?
I don't. I think I was drawn to poetry because I like working with imagery. I started off as a literary writer, so I really like working with imagery. The nice thing about poetry is that you don't have to know any grammar. You don't have to use complete sentences, all sorts of wonderful things. But ironically, I became an English teacher, so I learned all that stuff. But no, I don't write poetry. I learned around the same time that I wanted to win the Governor General's Award that I wasn't a very good poet.
I completely agree with you too. When I was younger, I also wanted to be a poet. I didn't dream of winning awards, but I thought it was easy. Like it just came natural to me, and it didn't seem that hard. Like you said, there were less rules. But as I studied it and as I met real poets, I was just like, nope, can't do it. So yeah, something to be said about poetry. So I'm glad you and I both chose the subgenre of mysteries. So let's talk about a little bit about The Client. I'm not picking favorites by any means, but I really enjoyed The Client. There was something about how it started off quite innocently, and I don't want to say too much. I'll let you do that. But as it grows and you start having those suspicions, and you start to wonder, who is the client? The story comes along really nicely. So without saying too much, what could you tell us about The Client?
Um, the character of Henry, who is the protagonist, came about because I went through a whole period of my life where I took MOOCs, the MOOC, massive open online courses.
Mhm.
And I took an elementary creative writing class because I've been writing since I was 5 years old, so that's a long number of years. But I figure I can always learn something. It's free. So I had to do a character sketch of somebody, and it turned out to be Henry. And what I really like about Henry is that he's an unreliable narrator, not to give too much away. Because what I do in the story is, and it's the literary writer in me, I play with the reader's this what's called sympathy for the character. And in literary terms, that doesn't mean someone you feel sorry for. It's whose side are you on in the story. And I think what happens in that story, it kind of flips back and forth, and that's part of the mystery is who do we trust, who's telling the truth, whose side are we on? And I think by the end of the story, hopefully people are on the side of the person I'd like them to be.
I hope I was. One thing I noticed from your work, both your poetry, sorry, not your poetry, both your short stories and your novels, is well, your series that you're known for is in Wales. This story was in British Columbia, Victoria, BC. Even your other short story I noticed was in Tuscany. Even though you live in Ontario, you don't seem to write too much about Ontario. Is there a reason for that?
The Tuscany story was because the first line of that story, which I think is probably the best first line I've ever written, came from a discussion we had in the English department about our favorite places to get pizza in Italy. I had nothing to add to that conversation, but somebody I taught with said, it was the year my father rented the villa in Tuscany. My God, I can't believe anybody I know would actually say that, would actually be in that situation. But I thought, what a great opening line for a story. And that's how that came about. So that had to be set in Tuscany.
Mhm.
Why don't I write in Ontario? My family, on my mother's side of the family, the next generation down, we're Welsh. So I've a lot of affinity for Wales. And I thought if I was going to spend the rest of my life writing about, living in the setting, it would be Wales. I mean, I don't want to spend it in the seedy underbelly of some city somewhere. But why don't I write about Ontario? I did actually write about Ontario in a strange way. When I came to write my standalone, which takes place on the coast of Massachusetts, my then agent wanted me to write an American setting. And I kept saying, I don't know how to write like an American. So what I devised was, I sort of imagined myself in Southern Ontario cottage country, because it takes place in a small town. And lots of references to baseball, lots of references to religion, more references to religion than I think we would have in Ontario, and a few other Americanisms. But as far as that feeling of small town, it was like a little cottage town in Southern Ontario. So I did write about Southern Ontario, but it was disguised.
Yeah, take out the hockey references and replace them with baseball references.
Baseball.
You're set.
Lots of flags, lots of American flags.
Yeah, that too. Also borrowing then from your website a little bit, in your explanation, the Meredith Island Mysteries are traditional mystery. And we were talking a little bit about what genre are. And I write, and when people ask me what I write, I often also say the same thing. It's a traditional mystery. But then they scratch their head and they're like, well, that's not a sort of a recognized subgenre. So then I often will just interchange it with cozy. And as soon as I say cozy, they go, now I understand what you were trying to say. I don't know. Do you have similar experiences when you tell people you write traditional mysteries?
Not necessarily, but I think cozy is more of an American subgenre. I mean, we use it up here. We definitely use that term up here. It's not used in the UK so much. And I think because I was raised British, I have a British sensibility. I tend to use traditional, and I was raised on Agatha Christie.
Mm-hmm.
And as I often tell people when they sort of go, well, what's traditional? I say, well, imagine Agatha Christie's writing now. Not that I'm comparing myself to Agatha Christie, but that's the kind of thing, the small area, limited number of characters, like a small town, or even my fourth book that I'm writing now takes place in an art retreat in a renovated manor in Cornwall. I've never been to Cornwall either. But without some of, I think that you're allowed to get away with slightly more bad language, and I think you're allowed to get slightly more violence in a traditional, whereas with a cozy, it all has to be done off screen. And a lot of cozies have sort of things like wool shops and recipes in the books, and people who do scrapbooking and things like that. And it's very, it's like the person down the street. But my person down the street doesn't do scrapbooking. My person down the street's an English teacher or a vicar or something like that.
Yeah, I think I guess it's a fine line. And
Yes.
I guess it's freeing, I think, maybe to say traditionalist, because a cozy is quite limited in what's expected out of you when you
I think
do it.
cozies have stronger guidelines for what you're allowed to get away with. It's kind of like
Mhm.
the Harlequin romance of mystery writing, that you have really set things you have to, or you can't include maybe.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I spoke to Vicky Delaney, the queen of cozies in Canada, and yeah, according to her, one thing too is you can't really dwell on the tragedy of the murder. You more or less have to kill off somebody everybody wants dead, and and the people don't respond with a lot of sorrow for that person. It's just meant to be a mystery, a happy, it's almost like a happy murder because it creates a problem to solve. Whereas I think a traditional mystery, we can sort of delve in the emotions maybe of the murder too, or of the death.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to kill off nasty people, although there have been a couple of nice people that have died. But I think that I'm always very careful too. What I love about traditionals, and maybe there are in cozies, I don't honestly don't read cozies that much, is there's more of a story arc. So for in each of the stories, my protagonist or someone really close to her is going through something really awful. Because there also has to be a reason why the amateur detective is solving the mystery. So
Mhm.
it's either somebody isn't, usually it's somebody on the island is in trouble and is being seen as a suspect. Um, so yeah, I almost think there might also be a little bit more emotion in a traditional.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it's come a long way from Agatha Christie. Um, but at the same time, like the path it's taken may not be the direction I wanted to go. So you make your own direction, right? And I think quite a few people in Canada, you're right, do it. Gail Bowen comes to mind, Kathy Ace. I wouldn't call them cozies,
No,
but
I don't
they're
think Cathy refers to herself as a cozy writer either.
no, I don't think so either. Actually, I think you and I can talk for about an hour on this subject, Alice, and let's not do that. So let me once again, plug Cold Canadian Crime, which is currently on sale. If you're watching this in December of 2022, it's 40% off, and even the ebook is down to like $3. So it's a great time to pick it up, even if you want it for yourself. Amazon's promising that if you order it today, it'll arrive in time for Christmas. So you can find information about that on um, Canada or Crime Writers of Canada .com. And if you want to learn more about um, Alice, you can visit her website at alicefitzpatrick.com. So thank you for joining me today, Alice. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.